Hi guys, this is Oliver from Lucy Security in Switzerland. I'm going to show you in this very short video a quick overview of our software. We're going to dive into the different functionalities, but before we start looking into the details, allow me to just give you a very brief overview of what we see the challenge in today's security market. So what is the challenge we're trying to solve with Lucy Security? When you look at the last years where the budget for IT security has been invested, you will notice that a lot has been invested in infrastructure security, endpoint security, sandboxing, behavioral antivirus, web application firewall, etc. So the challenge is that this didn't go unnoticed by hackers because they still think that it's probably the easiest to just bypass the whole infrastructure by attacking the end user behind that security infrastructure. So why bother hacking a firewall if you can just basically send an email to an employee, ask him to click on a link and download and execute a file and get access to the network much easier than just hacking the infrastructure directly. The best IT infrastructure protection won't prevent breaches in your organization if you have users who are not aware of the risks. That's why we try with our software to prevent breaches by basically educating the users towards cybersecurity risks. So what does end user education mean in Lucy Security? End user education covers many topics. The classical topics from social engineering are phishing, voice phishing, SMS attacks, USB attacks, and so on. There are also other topics like, for example, clear desk policy or physical security, what to do with printouts, incident handling, and so on. As you see, the list of topics is really long. In Lucy, we count more than 250 different training modules in more than 30 languages. Some contain videos, some are interactive with gamification. So how do you assess if the training actually has been successful? One way of doing this is by providing some exams at the end of the e-learning courses or some interactive quizzes where the user can put the knowledge to a test. Another possibility is providing so-called attack simulations where you act as the hacker and start attacking your own employees through like phishing emails, USB attacks. Those attack simulations can be bundled with e-learning courses in Lucy. So what you could do, for example, is start an attack simulation with a file download, and the moment the user downloads the file or executes the file, the training on malware risks would start. Or if the user would enter some login information on a website, a training towards social engineering phishing could start. So there are many attack simulations in Lucy you can use to verify the know-how of your employees. But how do you actually roll out a user awareness campaign in your organization? This is something which is usually a long-term project. You start by defining where you want to be at a specific time, and normally you define a time frame of about a year. So we call it the employee risk rates, where you define what is an acceptable risk rate for your organization. You could start with an attack simulation to find out what's the baseline, how good are the users already trained towards phishing. Or if you never did an awareness training before, you could start by basically training them on the basics of security. And over time, you develop a program with a learning path for your different departments where you set individual goals for those organizational units. So we covered now the basics of Lucy, what you can do with it. And I want to jump now into the application and show you how it looks like from an administrative perspective. So what you see here is the user interface, which is controlled in a web session via web browser. And when you log into the server here, by the way, the server can be set up on-premise or in the cloud as a dedicated system or as a shared system, like a software as a service. So when you log into the application, you will see this big blue campaign button. And you can imagine like a campaign is basically like a project, something you do with Lucy. When you click on this button, you see here the attack simulation, which is the models I mentioned before, like you could do a data entry attack. That would be, for example, asking the user to log in a web page. A file-based attack could be, for example, an attack where you attach an Excel with macro to an email or have the user download something from a web page and see if he opens that file. Portable media attack, that's USB attack, and smishing, that's actually delivering the same content just via SMS. So you can bundle those attack simulations with a training where the user gets trained instantly based on what you consider a successful attack. Or as an alternative, you could just start with the e-learning. This is what I mentioned before with like a whole learning path which you create for the end user. There's something what we didn't cover so far, which is also in here, and you might be surprised because like I mentioned in the beginning, infrastructure is something which is already built, and because there's a limitation to what infrastructure security can do, we have to train the users. So why is infrastructure testing in there? The reason is pretty simple. Let's look at the different models which you have in here. So first of all, let's look at this part, mail and web filter tests. You might know already what can pass your mail filter as an attachment and what the proxy allows as downloads for your end users. But when we speak to different organizations, we realize like it's obvious that certain attachment types are filtered and certain attachments can be not downloaded from web pages. But when you look into the details, there's so many variations how you can hide malware in seamlessly non-malicious files. It might be something you have to find out first in a technical test how the end user is actually protected. Because where the protection, the technical one, ends is where you need to train the user towards awareness. So that means if the user can download, for example, a Java applet in his browser and execute that, and you consciously open that on your proxy, you might want to also train the user. Or if you find out in this technical test that users can open a USB stick and execute from it, or can run certain files on their PC, that's something you want to educate them. So prior to a phishing simulation, you want to know what the risk is, like the technical risk, so you can train the user or test the user specifically to the gaps which you might identify with the technical tests here. So let's look again at the training topic here and dive into the awareness template which we have in Lucy. When I open the generic template section in Lucy, you will see the different variations of training templates available. So as I mentioned, there are hundreds of templates in there with different topics from phishing to social engineering, physical security, and so on. The templates are available in different languages already translated. And what you will notice in the templates, you always have the ability to add any language in there for the existing translation. So if your language is missing in here, you can add it in the drop down here for the according template. What is also important is like all the content which you see in Lucy is fully customizable. So what does that mean? Let's just use like a specific topic here and look at the different variations, how this is presented and how you can customize this. So for example, let's go here into one specific one, the avatar-based phishing training. So when you click on this template here and you navigate to the e-learning pages here and you select the according language, what you will notice here is a drop-down menu which gives you access to all the different files inside the training. So if you want to change a specific file in the training, you can just select the file and change it. For example, if you have a password security course, you want to customize this because you want to make sure the course gives the user the appropriate recommendation towards like how often you should change the password or how you perceive the security and maybe also what your policies are. So this is very important, the ability to change anything. You can just basically edit the text in here as well. You can upload files into the template. You can change the videos in here and add your own custom content to it. What you also notice is you have the ability to run the content at Lucy in the own LMS, but maybe you don't want to run all the training inside Lucy, and therefore we add the ability also to export the content via SCORM, so you can import it in your own learning management system in case you have one. So the customization of the content is important because you might want to address your specific risks and talk about your specific recommendations for the user. Of course, you can also customize the content in terms of look, the design, logo, corporate identity. And there's also the possibility to add maybe your own policies in the training. If you roll out, for example, a training to the end users, there's a chance you could also get the end user to acknowledge and read your current security policies. So what you could do, for example, I show you here in an example, you could embed your current security policies inside the training, and before the user starts the training, you can have him acknowledge this. So you can see in the LMS who read those policies, who acknowledged them. So for example here, before the user can start the training and click on the next button, the user can now read the policies. You can add them here inside as a content or like just as a reference, a link, and then at the very bottom the user has to acknowledge this, and then the user can start the actual end user training in the interface. When it comes to the way how we present the e-learning content to the end user, you will see that Lucy has a lot of different formats you can use to present the e-learning content. It could be just videos or interactive content where the user actually has to give some feedback, or you play a game with the user to measure the user awareness level. And the same topic can be actually presented in many different ways, from like very basic trainings to very more advanced trainings. So when you look here at the different templates, you enter the word phishing, you will see that there are a lot of different templates and ways in how to present just the topic of phishing. The one way is to do this in a micro e-learning, where the user just gets like a one-pager and can learn how to protect from phishing. It could be, for example, just a few tips where the user learns what he has to pay attention for. You can also have the tips read to the user. And at the end of the e-learning, just play a very short quiz where you can put the know-how to a test and basically find out what could be a phishing email, what could be a real email, and have the user in a sort of gamification go through the topic. Once you selected the layout for your awareness training, it's time to think about how you're going to roll out this training to the end user. So one possibility, of course, is sending an email with a link to the training. And that might work very well if you have just one training or one phishing simulation. But if you plan like a learning path for like a couple of months or even longer, and you have several trainings associated with the user, it's going to be very hard for the user to keep track of all the emails he might have received and all the links. So without the emails, the access to the training will be also lost. So instead of using emails for accessing the training, you could as well basically launch a training library. It's a function we have in Lucy under a static link, where you give the user the ability to access different trainings in a library. So that means when we look at this function here, you can map the different training by just clicking on the checkbox where you say, I want the user to see this training and maybe this training. You launch the library and the user will have like different trainings inside this view. Beside the training library, we also have in Lucy a function which is called Training Portal. It's a more advanced functionality where every user gets again access to a static link and can log into the system, where the user would see, for example, the success of phishing simulations in the past, would see also rating profile, especially compared to other users, and have access to all the training content, certificates, trainings done in the past, can resume training, or would see here trainings associated with this user based on phishing simulation or dedicated e-learning campaigns. As I mentioned, you can use static URLs for your training content. This is pretty important because you want to have a trusted domain for your awareness training, especially if you ask the user to click on a link and do some training. So it's better to use your company domain name instead of a generic unknown cloud server domain. When it comes to the domain API, you can also use it for your attack simulations. So let's say you want to do a phishing simulation based on the Black Hat page and you want to make a fake login there, and now you just need the according domain. We have a feature here in Domain API where you can basically just enter the domain which you want to spoof. You can check if it's available. If the domain is available, Lucy can buy this domain for you and create the according DNS records. That means all the DNS records, A record, MX record, wildcard, A record, SPF record, and so on will get created automatically for the system where Lucy is hosted. So why would you need a specific domain for your attack template? The reason is simple. In Lucy, you have a variety of different attack templates. They come in different flavors and different variations. So for example, if you look for existing templates in here, you can just type in like a search term and you find different variations for the same attack in Lucy. But maybe you want to build your own templates based on an existing web page. So let's say this here is your original web page, like a login from Black Hat, and you want to build a phishing simulation based on that. What you would do is you create your own template, and you can either create the page by scratch by yourself, or you can go in the copy feature, which allows you to clone the whole web page as it is with basically a click of a button. And that's where the custom domain came in place, because it allows you to not only clone the web page, to also create a typo-squatted domain which you put on top of that cloned web page. So maybe for more advanced users, where you can expect a certain user awareness, you can try such attack scenarios where you map this custom domain with the custom cloned web page. So you see here, this is the web page as it is cloned, and this is the original one, which is basically the same. There's so many more fun features I'd like to introduce here, but that would probably not fit in an introduction training in Lucy. So I kindly ask you to check out the other videos we have where we go a little bit more in detail about the specific options in Lucy. Thanks and see you soon.